I never expected my cousin's wedding to become the stage for one of the most intense and unexpected moments of my life. I was 35, single, and slightly jaded when I traveled back to that small Midwestern town. Let's call it Maplewood, population so low you'd blink and miss it on the highway. I'd grown up there, leaving right after high school to chase a life in the city. After all these years away, I'd gotten comfortable with anonymity, with the hum of subways, with new faces every day. Returning to Maplewood made me feel like I was stepping into an old photograph, a place that remembered me in ways I wasn't sure I wanted to recall. I kept asking myself how I had let my cousin, Penny, rope me into being her wedding coordinator for the day. She was the sweetest soul and I loved her, so here I was, hauling decorations across the community center, making sure the DJ arrived on time, and smoothing out tablecloths. I had been at it for hours, breaking a sweat in my new suit. A clock somewhere chimed noon. The ceremony would start in less than an hour, and the bride was still in hair and makeup. Meanwhile, her fiancé's family was complaining about the seating chart, that typical wedding fuss. And me, the city cousin, was stuck playing peacekeeper. I had just finished mediating a minor crisis. Someone forgot to bring the ring bearer's pillow, when I spotted a tall figure near the folding chairs in the back. At first, I assumed it was one of the groomsmen, but then he turned, and my heart gave a jolt. His name was Adrian. I recognized him immediately, though it had been nearly 2 decades since we'd last spoken. Back then, we were both scrawny kids in high school. Adrian had been my closest friend during those confusing teenage years, and also my biggest regret. We had shared something that was never really defined, just a tension that crackled beneath the surface. We'd stolen glances in the hallways, brushed hands in the cafeteria line, but we never labeled what we were. Maplewood wasn't the kind of place where 2 teenage boys could openly experiment. So our half-whispered confessions and anxious dreams stayed locked behind closed doors, until I left for college and he vanished from my life. But here he stood, taller than I remembered, broader in the shoulders, with hair that had grown a bit longer, curling around his ears. His suit was crisp, charcoal gray, accentuating the slight tan of his skin. When our eyes met, I felt instantly transported to a sticky summer night after prom, the 2 of us sitting in his beat-up car, so close but never quite close enough. It made my throat tighten. Adrian noticed me, froze for a second, and then offered a small nod that felt simultaneously warm and uncertain. I forced myself to grin and walked over, ignoring that tickle of nerves in my gut. "Fancy seeing you here," I said, attempting a casual tone. He lifted a shoulder. "Penny's fiancé works with me," he said softly. "He invited me. I didn't even know you 2 were cousins, to be honest." I opened my mouth, but the words got stuck. I'd pictured this reunion for years in some intangible corner of my mind. Maybe we'd bump into each other on a random city street, or reconnect on social media, or he'd show up at a bar in the big city. Instead, we were face to face at a wedding that suddenly felt like a vortex pulling us back into everything we used to be. "Guess fate wants us to cross paths," I said at last, forcing a laugh. A bride's relative scurried by, frantic about the missing ring pillow, but I just let them pass. My eyes stayed locked on Adrian's. He gave me a lopsided smile, as though reliving the same swirl of thoughts. Then we both got swallowed by wedding tasks. I hustled to help the florist with a late delivery of centerpieces while Adrian joined some old acquaintances by the gift table. The entire ceremony, Penny in her lacy white dress, tears in everyone's eyes, drifted by in a blur. My mind buzzed with the memory of Adrian's gaze, how it held that same secret from years ago. After the "I do's" and the bride's triumphant kiss, guests migrated to the reception hall next door. I hopped from table to table, greeting relatives and acquaintances I hadn't seen in forever. But I sensed Adrian's presence across the room like a magnet pulling me in. Every so often, I snuck a look at him, only to find him already glancing in my direction. We'd exchange a hint of a smirk, like co-conspirators, and then return to whatever conversation we were pretending to have. Eventually, I took a break near the open bar, sipping a gin and tonic, shoulders aching from all the wedding chaos. Music started pulsing across the hall, and couples drifted onto the dance floor. That's when Adrian slipped next to me, leaning against the wall in a relaxed pose. He fiddled with his cufflinks for a moment before murmuring, "It's like time never passed, right?" I felt my chest constrict. "You still have that same look," I said. "Like you're about to say something, but you never do." He tilted his head. "Maybe I just didn't know how you'd respond." I swallowed. There was something electric in that moment, a humming tension that had never truly left. The two of us, older, changed by the world, but maybe still bound by that old, unspoken desire. Without a second thought, I grabbed 2 glasses of champagne from the bartender and handed one to Adrian, clinking them together. "To old times," I said. "And to the new ones, maybe." He nodded and took a sip, his eyes never leaving my face. That was all the invitation I needed. Before overthinking it, I took his wrist gently, guiding him away from the crowd. I figured if we were going to talk, or do anything more, some privacy was essential. We slipped behind a partition that led into a hallway used mostly by the caterers and staff. There, the music was muffled, the corridor dim, except for the flicker of an exit sign overhead. As soon as we stood in that quieter space, I realized how fast my heart was racing. Adrian's breathing, too, sounded heavier. He glanced at me, parted his lips, and let out a soft laugh. "This feels like senior year all over again." Sneaking around in the cafeteria hallway, trying to find a moment alone. I chuckled, but my voice was unsteady. "Funny how the past never really leaves you." I wanted to say 1,000 things, how I regretted never calling him, how I replayed the last night we saw each other, how I still thought about him in ways that kept me up at night. But my brain short-circuited, so I just took a step closer. We were inches apart, breath mingling. His cologne was subtle, laced with something fresh and peppery. My fingertips tingled. Adrian's eyes searched mine, as though asking for permission. My chest fluttered with an exhilaration that felt both forbidden and essential. We weren't kids anymore. Technically, we didn't owe anyone an explanation. Maplewood's judgments didn't have the same power they once had. Still, the taboo sense of, "what if someone sees us," gave the air a delicious crackle. Adrian reached out, brushing his knuckles against mine in a teasing gesture. It was the lightest contact, but heat surged under my skin. "It's been so long," he whispered. And with that, I closed the gap, pressing my lips to his in a gentle but deliberate kiss. His mouth was warm, slightly trembling at first, but soon we found a rhythm. It was hesitant, tender, all the words we'd never managed to say melted into that one moment. My mind spun like it had left the ground. I had kissed men before, plenty, actually, during my years in the city, but none of them held that nostalgic throb of repressed teenage longing. None of them made me feel like I was discovering something both new and long overdue. After a few seconds, we broke apart, both of us panting. A wave of adrenaline crashed over me. "I should have done that when we were 17, I said with a shaky laugh. Adrian's cheeks flushed, but he grinned. "Better late than never. Although I'm not sure we can vanish from the reception for too long without raising questions." He was right. Already, I imagined some distant uncle or a nosy aunt wandering these hallways, catching us in the act. So I stepped back, heart pounding, and forced a playful grin. "This wedding will eventually end. Maybe we can catch up properly afterward." He nodded. Yes. I'd like that. We returned to the reception as if nothing had happened, though I felt the imprint of his lips on mine the entire night. I danced with my cousin, toasted with family members, and kept spotting Adrian from the corner of my eye. Sometimes he'd be engaged in conversation with an old coworker, or tapping his foot by the bar, or glancing my way with that secret smile. I felt alive, charged, a little reckless. Close to midnight, when the newlyweds left for their honeymoon suite, the party began to wind down. I made my way outside to get some air. The community center's parking lot was quiet, illuminated by tall lamps. A warm breeze ruffled my hair, carrying the scent of cut grass and summer night. Then I heard footsteps behind me. I turned and found Adrian again, hands in his pockets. He approached without a word, his expression mirroring the same hunger and uncertainty I felt. Neither of us needed to speak to know we had to continue this. I mentioned my motel, a budget inn at the edge of town, humble, but with an available room. Adrian hesitated only a moment before nodding. That single gesture sent a ripple of excitement through me. We drove separately. My knuckles were white on the steering wheel, a swarm of nerves in my stomach. By the time we reached the motel, it was nearly 12:30 a.m. The parking lot was deserted, the office lights dim. My key clicked in the lock, and the door swung open to reveal a small, unremarkable space, a double bed, a TV, an outdated lamp on the nightstand. But in that moment, it felt like the only place on earth that mattered. Adrian followed me in. A wave of tension settled between us, thick, palpable. For years, we'd avoided confronting what we once felt. Now, there was no more running away. He closed the door softly, and we faced each other. For a brief moment, doubt flickered in his eyes. Maybe it was all too sudden. Maybe it was foolish to think we could pick up from where we'd left off. But I reached for him, resting a hand on his chest, feeling his rapid heartbeat through his shirt. "Are you okay?" I asked, my voice low. He exhaled. "Yeah. It's just. I never thought we'd be here." Before I could respond, he tilted his head and kissed me again, this time deeper, more urgent. My heart slammed into my ribs. I eased him back until the mattress hit his legs. We tumbled onto the bed, hands exploring shoulders, backs, arms, learning the map of each other's bodies in a way we never dared as teens. There was a desperation, a sense of recapturing lost years, and it electrified every gesture. My jacket and tie were tossed aside, his suit jacket slipped onto the floor. Warm fingers slid under my shirt, and I shivered. It wasn't purely lust, there was something tender in the friction of our lips, the tension in our breathing. A longing that had been denied for so long now found release. We kept it at the edges of soft moans and meaningful touches, every second saturated with the taboo thrill that we were finally allowing ourselves something we should have had all those years ago. Eventually, we slowed, both of us still half-dressed, lying side by side on the cheap motel bed. My pulse hammered in my ears. Adrian ran a fingertip across my collarbone, his gaze distant. "Did you ever wonder what happened to me?" he asked softly. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. "I did. I guess I assumed you'd gone off to live some fulfilling life, found yourself in another city." A sad little smile curved his lips. "I tried. Moved around, had relationships that never really worked out. Always felt like I was missing something, someone. I told myself I'd get over it, that I was just stuck in some old fantasy." My chest tightened with an unexpected rush of emotion. "I left Maplewood half out of fear, you know. My parents suspected something about me, about us. I couldn't stay. I was so scared of what people would say, of what I'd have to face." I paused, feeling tears prick at the corners of my eyes. I should have contacted you, but I was terrified. I kept telling myself it was better that I just vanished. He reached up, thumb tracing my jawline. You did what you had to do. So did I, in my own way. But we're here now. We lay there in silence, letting that reality sink in. The thick motel curtains blocked out the streetlights. The only illumination was the faint glow from the alarm clock on the nightstand, casting a dim orange hue across our bodies. Despite the darkness, I could still see the sorrow in Adrian's eyes, the relief that we were finally speaking truths we buried for too long. The next few hours were spent in quiet talk, in relearning each other's stories, interspersed with soft kisses that tasted of longing and promise. We drifted off around 3 a.m., wrapped in a tangle of limbs. I couldn't remember the last time I'd fallen asleep feeling so whole, even with the swirl of questions about what would come next. Morning arrived with a flood of bright sunlight through a gap in the curtains. I blinked, disoriented for a moment. Then I felt the mattress shift and realized Adrian was stirring beside me. For a brief flash, I worried he might regret it all. But the way he looked at me, a mixture of warmth and trepidation, eased my fears. We showered separately, each of us trying to keep the moment from slipping into the mundane. I insisted on grabbing us coffee from the motel lobby, and we sat on the edge of the bed, sipping from styrofoam cups. Part of me expected him to say a rushed goodbye, but he lingered, touching my knee lightly. "What are your plans now that the wedding is over?" he asked. I shrugged. "I'm supposed to stay in town for another day or two, catch up with family. Then I head back to the city. What about you?" "I was going to drive home tonight," he replied. "I live about 2 hours away. But, maybe I could hang around." He sounded tentative, as if testing the waters. My heartbeat kicked up a notch. "I'd like that," I said softly. "It's been too long, and we've just scratched the surface." We checked out of the motel around 10, parted ways briefly so we could handle our respective obligations. He had some errands, I needed to see Penny one last time for a post-wedding brunch. As I navigated Maplewood streets, the place seemed different. No longer just a dusty small town full of memories I wanted to escape. It felt more like a place where something beautiful had been reignited. Later that afternoon, I met Adrian at a local diner, one of those spots with vinyl booths and laminated menus. We slipped into a corner booth, the overhead fan humming. I noticed the way the waitress eyed us, perhaps noticing the subtle closeness in our posture, but I tried not to care. We were grown men, we didn't owe an explanation. We chatted about random things, favorite movies, the kind of music that shaped our teenage years. When the conversation dipped, I took a chance. "Would you ever move somewhere else? Away from Maplewood? Maybe the city?" He exhaled slowly, eyes dropping to his coffee. "I've thought about it. I never quite felt at home here, but I had responsibilities. My dad got sick, I stayed to help out. I do construction jobs in a nearby town. But now, I'm not sure." He looked up, gaze soft. "Are you asking me to come to the city with you?" His candidness made my cheeks burn. "I'm not sure," I answered truthfully. "But I can't pretend this is just a fling. It doesn't feel like that to me." Adrian's fingers twitched, like he wanted to hold my hand. "Same here," he said, voice thick with emotion. "It's complicated, but I want to see where it goes." I realized how insane it sounded, two men reuniting after almost 20 years, spending one night together in a motel, and then planning a future. Yet the thought made my heart soar, a rebellious thrill that overshadowed logic. We wound up spending the rest of the day together, driving around Maplewood, pointing out places that triggered memories. The school football field. The ice cream parlor that had become a coffee shop. The hill where I once drove my first car. We even found the spot behind the bleachers where we had once nearly kissed on a dare, but chickened out at the last second. This time, with no one around, we shared a brief but heated kiss under the hot afternoon sun. It was strangely healing, like rewriting the past. Dusk arrived, painting the sky in pinks and oranges. Neither of us wanted to face the moment when we'd have to separate. But eventually, we drove back to my aunt's place, where I was staying, and parked on a quiet side street. The silence in the car was loaded with 100 unspoken questions. Will we really see each other after this? Are we strong enough to keep contact, to fight for a deeper relationship? I turned to Adrian, seeing the same mix of hope and fear etched on his face. When are you going to drive back home? I asked softly. He thought for a moment. I guess tonight. I have a work shift tomorrow. But, could you come visit me sometime? My home's not fancy, but there's a guest room. Or, I can come to the city. We'll make it work. My chest tightened with affection for this man who had once been a gangly teen I secretly adored. Yeah, I said. We'll make it work. He leaned in and pressed his lips to mine, a slow, lingering kiss that seemed to seal a silent promise. I savored it, ignoring the possibility of a nosy neighbor or passing car. For that moment, we were free. Eventually, we broke apart, breath unsteady. Adrian murmured a goodbye and slipped out of the car, casting one last glance over his shoulder before vanishing into the twilight. I stayed in Maplewood one more night. The next morning, I packed my bags, exchanged goodbyes with family, and headed back to my city life. But this time, I wasn't weighed down by regret. My phone buzzed with the occasional text from Adrian, silly photos of the leftover wedding decorations still being cleaned up, a random snapshot of his dog, or short messages like, "Miss you," that made me grin like an idiot. In the following weeks, we tried to keep the flame alive from a distance. I had a hectic job schedule, and he had projects that sometimes took him to different work sites, but we found windows of time to call, to share stories about our days. It felt surreal to be bridging the gap after all those years. The morbo of being each other's forbidden first love still lingered, but now it was tempered by a genuine desire to see if we could build something lasting. Finally, we agreed on a weekend that worked for both of us. Adrian would drive down to my city and stay with me, get a feel for my environment. I cleaned my apartment like a madman, wanting to make it cozy for him. When he arrived, lugging an overnight bag and a grin, I felt a surge of excitement. We spent the weekend exploring my neighborhood, holding hands in public when we felt confident enough, stealing hidden kisses in the elevator of my building. At home, we curled up on my couch, watching old movies we used to quote in high school. The tension was there but blossomed into something deeper, more trusting. On Saturday night, I took him to one of my favorite rooftop bars. It was bustling with people of all backgrounds, a place where seeing two men in an embrace wasn't worth a second glance. Adrian looked slightly overwhelmed at first, glancing around with cautious curiosity. But soon, he relaxed, sipping a craft beer and leaning his shoulder against mine as we admired the skyline. Under the neon glow of the rooftop signage, we felt like we were living a dream, one that wasn't overshadowed by the secrets of Maplewood's small-town prejudice. We laughed easily, recounted silly anecdotes from our youth. Part of me was waiting for the other shoe to drop, but it never did. The entire weekend felt seamless and right. On Sunday night, as I walked him back to his truck, a pang of sadness coiled in my stomach. Our lives were still separate, but each moment together fueled the conviction that we wanted something real. Adrian lingered at the driver's side door, keys in hand. "I'll call you on the way home," he said, voice husky with emotion. I nodded, stepping closer to brush a strand of hair off his forehead. He gently clasped my hand. I'm serious about this, he continued, eyes searching mine. We lost enough time. Let's not lose more. My throat felt tight. Agreed, I whispered. We kissed, slow and deep, my fingers gripping the lapels of his jacket. The city lights glimmered around us, and I knew that despite the distance, the baggage, and the complexities ahead, we had a shot. We'd faced so many years of unspoken desire. Now it was out in the open, and we were choosing it. Adrian drove away with a soft wave. I stood there until his taillights disappeared, heart pounding with a mix of gratitude and longing. That night, as I lay alone in my bed, I replayed the entire weekend in my mind, his laughter, the curve of his mouth against mine, the glimpse of hope in his eyes. I drifted off into a dreamless sleep, secure in the knowledge that, for once, I wasn't letting fear hold me back. Over the next few months, we found small ways to close the gap. Adrian took on fewer out-of-town jobs to free up weekends. I arranged a few work-from-home days so I could stay in Maplewood or near his place. We were taking baby steps toward merging our routines. And with each step, I felt more certain that all the heartbreak, all the confusion of our teen years, had led us here, to a version of ourselves willing to fight for the connection we once denied. It wasn't always easy. We argued sometimes, about finances, about where we might eventually live. Adrian had lingering concerns about how his extended family or some of his old friends would react if we took bigger steps, like moving in together. Occasionally, that tension flared. But we always found our way back to communication, remembering how precious this second chance was. One morning, almost a year after Penny's wedding, I woke up to see Adrian's bag near the doorway of my apartment once again. He'd come for the weekend, but the weekend had stretched into a week and a half. I realized I wanted it to stretch forever. Lying beside him, watching him blink away sleep, I gently brushed my fingertips over his cheek. He smiled lazily. "Morning," he muttered. My heart thundered with a sudden clarity. "Move in with me," I whispered. His eyes flicked open, fully awake now. For a moment, neither of us spoke, letting the weight of that request settle. Then he grinned. "You're sure?" I laughed, a shaky sound. "I've never been more sure of anything. Let's stop pretending we're okay with these short visits. Let's figure out the rest." He exhaled and nodded, eyes glowing. "I want to. I really do." We sealed it with a slow, tender kiss. Maybe there would be complications. Maybe Maplewood's gossip mill would churn. Maybe we'd have to navigate old family grudges. But none of that mattered as much as the warmth of his body next to mine, the promise of waking up together every day. After all the time, after the years spent apart, we had something worth fighting for. That surge of forbidden excitement, our teenage morbo, was still there, now tempered with the resolve of adulthood. And so our story continues. Even now, I sometimes catch a glimpse of him across our shared living room, reading a newspaper or tinkering with some home repair, and I can't help but flash back to those days in Maplewood High, where we danced around a feeling we didn't dare name. It took us years to find the courage to hold each other without shame. But now, each day is a quiet victory over the fear that once kept us silent. Yes, we lost so much time. But as I watch him laugh, face lit by the morning sun that floods through the window, I realize that we're exactly where we need to be. We've reclaimed our story, and maybe that's the real triumph, allowing ourselves a second chance at love we once thought was impossible. And it still makes my heart pound, that perfect combination of warmth and tension, of homecoming and desire. Because with Adrian, I finally know what it means to have it all.